Hi, this is Anthony Hamilton. I'm the author of Mind, Time, and Power, which is a book that says your mind actually is a kind of time machine and that thinking is time traveling. Now, at first hearing, this sounds a little bit bizarre, but if you think about it for a moment, I think you'll realize that every time you think of the past or every time you're thinking of the future, there's a part of your mind that is traveling into the past or traveling into the future like a drone can travel across a football field and send back information to the person who is controlling the drone. And you are the person controlling the drone. Now, this is part two of a conversation about retrocausation, which is an aspect of mental time travel. And it's an aspect of physics. For over 100 years now, since the time of Einstein, scientists have realized that the mathematics of relativity physics say that it's possible for the cause for something to be in the future as well as the past. This is a huge departure from classical physics, which is what we've all learned growing up, the fact that the cause for something has to be in the past, that the effect follows the cause. Well, we're not billiard balls, which is the model that Isaac Newton was using to describe the laws of motion. We have a mind that can move into the past or move into the future. So the cause for our life in the present is partly information from the past and partly information from the future. This is why we need to learn to use our inner mind to travel in time. We need to learn to meditate, go inside, and choose which goals, which future we want to manifest. So this is part two of the recording.
But they still got to do it. Right?
Yeah,
They
that's
still
right.
have to do all the parts of it. Now, the other part that I thought was really interesting is that I've noticed the connection. For example, if I go buy a cake mix, it's not long until we have cake in the house, right? You buy a certain ingredients and they happen to be ready and somebody sees them and they say, let's do that. So, but now after a few times of doing that, you say, well, wait a minute. If I think about what I want, I could go buy some of those ingredients to be ready to at least prompt that to happen. So that's kind of goal setting with retrocausation being understood, right? So that forward goal of having the, lasagna or whatever it might be, or some kind of meal, having the ingredients in the cupboard and maybe having prominently in the front makes it someone says, well, we got to cook tonight. What are we going to cook? Well, I got the stuff for, that recipe for that stuff, but it could now happen in other areas. So you say, hey, I want to build muscle mass. So you're going to have some creatine around, you're going to have some protein powder, you're going to, have a gym membership that's active. You're going to have a group of people you're going to meet. You're going to start putting it on the calendar. That's how goal achievement changes your reality. Because people say, I don't know how to get in shape. Well, yes, you do. First of all, start with the idea of being in shape or, taking your body measurements, taking your, lab tests with the doctor, going to the doctor, taking the lab test, seeing what your markers are, seeing how you're going to improve your health and having a vision. But the tighter that vision gets and the more ingredient aspects you put down prepared for yourself, it starts. Now, then you may say, well, I'm really close. I've got half of the ingredients already done. Okay, now you make your to-do list. You say, I got these other four I got to do. Right? Now you got to go to the gym every, couple times a week, and you got to change that meal a couple times a week. But before you know it, it's getting a lot closer to happening. But so many people don't, they may see it in small ways. I think of like playing chess. Everybody could do two moves, but can
Yeah,
you do 10 moves? Can you do
yeah, that's
15
right.
moves deep? You
Yeah, there's
know?
a couple. Yeah, there's a couple of different things about it. Like talking about Michael Caine again.
Hmm.
He says that when he finally made it as a movie actor and eventually a star, he
Uh-huh.
he said he was the last one of all his friends. Like he had these friends he used to hang around with, Terrence Stamp was his roommate, so they lived together for a while. And he was in a movie called Billy Budd, and he became a big star. And Sean Connery, he became a big star, and he was a good friend of Michael Caine. Michael Caine, he says the last time I was in the lineup for the Dole, Sean Connery was 2 people ahead of him. So they all went from, being broke aspiring actors to being successful actors. But my point is they all knew each other, right? So they were in that arena. They all were exchanging information. They were either encouraging each other or inspiring each other, or people could see, hey, if so-and-so can do it, I can do it, which is why when people decide, generally speaking, they want to be a movie star, they go to California.
Right.
And they start to hang out and they meet more and more people. And eventually they get to the place where all of their friends are in the movie business. And then the word gets around, hey, there's an audition coming up for such and such a thing, go and try out. And so then they get the job, but it isn't so much magical that all of a sudden they get this job. No, it's because, as you said, they kind of set the conditions up in advance. They were in the business. They were hanging out with other people in the business. They were trying out for roles. They were reading scripts. They were taking acting lessons. They were doing all these things. And then eventually one of their friends says, hey, I got a part in this movie and there's a part for you in it if you want to go and try out, So it's like eventually you get kind of a critical mass, and it's almost inevitable. And one of the things that I mentioned during this talk in Bournemouth was this commencement address that Steve Jobs gave, I think in 2006 at Stanford. He was giving the commencement address, and he said it as perfectly as anybody I've ever heard, talking about making your dreams come true. He said that looking to the future, you don't know what's going to pay off. You don't know what's going to work. You just have to keep trying. And then he said, after it's happened, assuming it happens eventually, you're going to be able to look back and you can see how the dots line up. But looking into the future, you can't tell which one is going to be a head or which one's going to be a tail.
Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever, because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart even when it leads you off the well-worn path, and that will make all the difference.
Like Michael Caine can look back and say, wow, me getting that job in the butter factory was really lucky because the guy I was working with told me about that newspaper where they advertised jobs in the acting business. If I hadn't got that job in the butter factory and talked to that guy, maybe I never would have made it. But of course, this is after the fact, right? Looking backwards. Now, the thing about retrocausation is that it's mental. So time is this mental thing. This is what St. Augustine said. Both the past and the future exist in my mind, and they both have a kind of reality to them, right? So if you look at, for example, if you look purely at the physical world, which is what most people do, then, you can look at you saying, well, how is it that he can bake a cake? Well, the reason he can bake a cake is because he went to the store and bought some baking mix and ingredients and took them home and put them in the cupboard so they were ready for the next time he wanted to make a cake. All that is physical world. All that's physical stuff, right? Going to the store, buying the mix, putting it in the cupboard, taking it out later, putting it together, making a cake. All that's physical. But the thing is, why did you do it in the first place? It's because you had an idea that said, hey, I think I'd like to make a cake next week. So I'll go to the store one day and get some ingredients, right? So the idea comes from the future, or at least it's a connection to the future, right? You see yourself in the future going, oh, I think I'd love to have a, angel food cake. So I'll get a mix, Now, the funny thing is, one of my thoughts when I had this original dream, I remember this happened like immediately afterwards. I don't know if it was a few weeks or a few months afterwards, but I was thinking about this dream. What's going on here? And I thought, well, whatever it was, it must happen to lots of people. They just don't notice it. And now I'm more and more convinced that that's exactly true. It's like you said a minute ago, the pieces are there, but they don't seem to fit your map. And then later, either you change the map or you look at them again and you go, oh, hey, wait a second. Actually, it is part of my map. I just didn't understand it.
What Steve Jobs was referring to in that little film clip was faith, which they say is the evidence of things not seen. And a leap of faith is the act of believing in or committing to something despite a lack of concrete evidence, logic, or certainty of the outcome. It involves taking a significant risk, such as changing careers or starting a new venture based on trust, hope, or, as coined by Soren Kierkegaard, a reliance on the unseen. And of course, in Christianity, they say faith is the evidence of things unseen. So some of the key aspects of a leap of faith, according to my Google search, are it's an action taken without knowing if it will succeed, often requiring one to move from tangible, logical, and safe ideas into the unknown. In personal growth, they talk about taking a risk to improve one's life, which often initiates a positive, confident transformation, according to an article in Psychology Today. In business or life decisions, it might mean quitting a job or starting a business or investing in a new idea that requires a leap of faith. In theology, it's referred to as believing in God or believing in religious doctrines that cannot be proven purely by reason. And it's not just blind faith. A leap of faith is not entirely irrational. It can be supported by accumulated knowledge, skills, and personal conviction. So the best example that I've seen in film of a leap of faith is this scene from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So as you pointed out a few minutes ago, Greg, these ideas probably already exist on people's maps. They just haven't looked at it this way before.
Path of God. Only in the leap from the lion's head will he prove his worth. It's impossible. Nobody can jump this.
Indy! Indy, you must hurry! Come quickly!
It's a leap of faith. God. You must believe, boy. You must believe.
Like I can
Right.
say this word lawsman, and you can go, what's that? I have no idea what a lawsman is. But when I explain what it is to you, you can say, oh yeah, I was in Mexico and that's where we stayed. We stayed at one of these things, and that's what they call a lawsman in Indonesia. And it's a little arrangement of huts on a beach with a place that sells food and serves drinks and makes food, like a little restaurant on the beach, right? And then they rent out these
Right.
cabins. That's a lawsman, right? Well, in Mexico, they call it something else. I don't know what they call it in Mexico, but I'm sure those things probably exist on every beach in the world.
Hmm.
So you go, oh, hey, I didn't know what that was. Only when I heard the word lawsman, I didn't know it meant that, right? And
Right.
that's kind of what retrocausation was for me. Like I realized, oh yeah, it's a thought, it's an expectation. Now, my original intuition that it must happen to lots of people, but they just don't know what to call it, so they forget about it or they don't talk about it. And I've since realized that lots of people do talk about it, but people misunderstand the language. Like Carl Jung says, when you spot something or you get an idea and it has a certain feeling for you, a certain interest, a certain motivation, it sparks a certain desire for you.
Hmm.
It might be your future self trying to manifest in the present. Now that's profound, right? Think
Hmm.
about that. It's like a story, and you've heard this story 100 times. Somebody says to an actress, how did you get into the acting business? What made you become an actress? And she says, well, when I was young, my parents took me to see The Wizard of Oz with Judy Garland, and I sat there in the theater watching her singing and dancing and tripping down the yellow brick road and everything. And I thought, that's what I want to do. That's exactly what I want to do. So I started taking singing and dancing lessons and acting lessons and eventually going to auditions and things like that and getting into amateur theater. And then eventually, I became an actress, right? So the spark happened years before, like Carl Jung says. It's like your future self is talking to you saying, hey, notice this, pay attention. If this sparks something in you, follow it up, right? Which is what Steve Jobs said too. He said, you have to have something to keep going. And he said, you can call it faith, you can call it intuition, you can call it a gut feeling, whatever it is. Something has to keep you trying when it looks like you can't possibly win. And afterwards, you look back and you go, oh, now I see how it happened. But looking forward, you can't see it. So when I explained this thing to these people in Bournemouth, one of them said, well, it must have been your destiny. That's why it happened to you. Well, what's destiny? Well, destiny is just a word that means it was meant to be, right? Well,
Yeah.
it wasn't.
Destination, right? Does it come from
Well,
destination?
exactly. It's your destination. Well, it wasn't exactly meant to be until after it was to be, to be or not to be. Once it happened, then you look back and you go, oh, okay. Well, in some way, it's kind of inevitable, right? But it
Right.
only looks inevitable because you hung in there when everybody said it's impossible. You're a fool to keep trying to do this.
Right.
I'm sure so many people discouraged Michael Caine from acting, saying, you're never going to make it. And he tells lots of stories about agents and people like that he was talking to that said, I really like you, Michael. I think you're a great guy. But you have to understand something. I've been in this business for 40 years, and there's no place for you in it.
Right. Well, it's interesting because one of the things that happens when you pick a destination that's out there, that's far out there or far out, let's call it, a lot of people tell you no, and because you don't know the how. You say, I don't know how it's going to happen, but it's
Yeah,
going to happen, right?
you can't
And
see. You
then,
don't see the how.
right.
Maybe
But
you
if you
can't
look
see
at,
the how either.
right, well, you can't see it either. But the point is, it's a little bit like that movie Interstellar, right? Interstellar, the guy goes into this weird space in space and sees the permanence of the future. It's already happened in the past, it's already happened and all that stuff in the present. And he goes, from the future basically into the past, reaches back into the past and changes some of the actions, and that changes the people's response, and therefore the future changes, which is saving kind of the situation that he was in. It changes the situation, kind of again, like Back to the Future, the movie, right? But it's the same thing as Steve Jobs saying, "I want a world where cell phones, are like PCs," right? He sees a vision, and he says, "I don't know how we're going to get there." He starts whipping the troops into shape, and you're going to invent something, or you're going to make a screen that looks like, no, there's nothing like that. No, you're going to buy a company that makes a screen like that, and we'll integrate it into Apple and the phone, and before you know it, the desire to have the change brings the physical change to culmination. And each of those steps is, I got half the ingredients, but I don't know how the other half are going to get there. Right. But it starts to flesh itself out. The vision becomes clearer as you're on the road. You say, I have half. Now I can see the other half. Now it's starting to come together, right? At the end, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I mean, but you can have small successes like that. And now you say, aha, I know how it works.
To get your own free copy of the book that this entire training series is based upon, either the ebook, the audiobook, or the paperback, where you can also get a free copy of this Design Your Life workbook. Go to mindtimeandpower.com.